I am Nahid Kabbani, and this is the Lighthouse for today's viewers. Welcome to our show. War is always ugly. We have war everywhere around us. But the most ugly scene or picture when you have kids at war, when we use kids to do the dirty job, what we look for. We have our guests today to discuss this matter. Let's start with Ms. Hassina. Introduce yourself.
I'm Hassina Leelarathne. I'm the editor of Sri Lanka Ecpress, a newspaper that serves the Sri Lankan community in the United States. I'm particularly interested in the issue of child soldiers because Sri Lanka has a very big problem with thousands of children being held by a militant group. They are being held in detention camps where they are being trained to use weapons, to kill, to be suicide bombers. And this issue has been going on for a very long time, and I think that we have lost several generations of children, of people, by simply ignoring this matter, and that it is time to make a change.
My name is Nisreen Malhais. I am a member of the Palestinian Women Organization and Muslim Public Affairs Council. I have been an activist and I talk about issues that related to women and children. Also, I have been doing public speaking to bring awareness about Muslim and Arabs and Palestinians.
My name is Ira Thompson. I was born in Israel, Jewish background, and now I'm working with Women Federation for World Peace to really address issues in the world and here in a community to bring peace and harmony. And especially we feel concerned about a global situation now where children are being used in order to further interest of organization as a suicide bomber or for violence purposes, and it's really of a great concern to us.
So as women, as mothers also, we can feel and relate to this issue more than maybe men in general, and would like to open the discussion about this point. So how you think how ugly it is in Sri Lanka to use the kids?
It's very ugly. Just a couple of days ago, the war has now intensified in Sri Lanka between the Sri Lankan government forces and the separatist rebel group, I should say. And most recently, when the government troops were attacking the rebels, they fired upon a facility which was claimed to be an orphanage. Then they said it was a school. The forces maintained that it is a camp where there were children. Now UNICEF has identified the victims as being children. But what we cannot yet determine is whether they were combatants, they were being trained, or whether they were in school. Now the rebels are claiming that they were just school children. However, the military has shown a lot of information and documentation that these were actually being children who were being trained and were in combat. Now, and the military also went on to say that we really don't care about the age of the person who is attacking us. If we are attacked, we will attack back. So there, in a nutshell, is the situation where the military or any forces that are fighting will not stop to say that this is a child. So the children are in the forefront of this, and in the case of Sri Lanka, it is really bad, very ugly, because we see bodies of children, rows and rows of children. Then we see images of children holding guns, being trained to hold guns, being trained as suicide bombers, their heads being blown off. It is very ugly.
Actually, suicide bomber all over the world, I guess they use kids underage in general just to brainwash them and use them. And we have seen an example in certain areas while the war was taking place.
That's right, because they've taken them away from a family situation. They keep them in these camps. They brainwash them. They also dehumanize them. They put them through so many tests where they are used to go to attack, little attacks, whether they'll throw a bomb here and there, then whether they're willing to rip a soldier up, a dead body. They get used to that. They are desensitized. They are dehumanized, and they are also taught that it is a great heroic act to be a suicide bomber, to give up your life for a cause. And a child very easily is impressed.
I think it raises concern about the future of mankind because children are very susceptible and very influenced. It's easy to influence them to think a certain way. And we can see a number of areas in the world, like in Africa, for example. I was talking about, I think it was in Uganda, where you have rebels group, and actually they also kidnap kids, children, and they force them, actually, and I didn't want to say it to you, but they have to bite the skin to bleed them to death. They have to bite other children to bleed them to death. And it's just like incomprehensible to a person who is growing up in a normal society. Some of those kids escaped, actually, and there are now Christian organizations like World Vision, I think, that create a rehabilitation program in Uganda to actually help them. They have counseling and they give them food and clothes, and they try to reconnect them to the families. But even the families are afraid to receive them back because of the state of mind they're in. They're afraid of them. Okay. So we can think about the world today. It's, Sri Lanka, and we believe also that, in Africa and in the Middle East, there's a lot of situation now that children are being used more and more, indoctrinated for violence. And I think it's a great concern. I think it should be an issue that we all should deal with sooner or later. I mean, sooner than later.
For example, I was born and raised in Palestine, and I am a Muslim woman. So I would like to take this opportunity to clarify that suicide bombing or suicide in general is not acceptable in Islam. It is forbidden. And I see some Muslim who will commit suicide and they say it is an Islamic thing to do. So we need to clarify that. Suicide bombing is something horrible in any religion, in any part of the world. And I'd like to elaborate on the suicide bombing in Palestine, like both of you said. It is so unfortunate. And I don't like to justify that act, but I'm trying to understand sometimes why these young children in Palestine are willing to commit suicide. And it seems sometimes when we make some profile to these individuals, either they are living in a refugee camp, they feel they lost hope for life, and they don't have food on the table, they don't have roof over their heads, they are unemployed, and it seems like the end for them. So these young individuals are target to be able to be convinced that go ahead and do that. I'm not justifying their actions, and I don't see how. To me, like those kids are losing their life before they're even starting it. And this is something so sad and so horrible. But you go back, wars are something horrible. And who create wars? Wars. Those men who are in power, they create these wars. And when you go through war caused poverty, so much destruction, so much humility, and you deprive those families from so many different things. And that create that state of mind for those kids. So to be able to prevent that, I believe we need to address these issues for our governments and for our decision makers. And each war there is a destruction. I don't see any win. I don't believe if somebody who go through a war say, oh, we won. There is no such thing because there is so much losses.
It's not only war, but we can see that today there's a human trafficking issues.
Yes.
Where young kids are being sold either for labor or for prostitution. And so even if we didn't have any war, there's the poverty issue, like you said, I agree with you. The situation itself allow for parents to sell the children sometimes. I mean, as a parent sometimes. To lure them because it's a matter of life and death for them. I mean, there's no food. So I agree with you that if you really provide the environment for people to be, just get what they need and be prosperous, no one will actually resort to such a thing.
Absolutely.
So I think that we need actually to provide education, food, and I don't know if it can be done with the help of the UNESCO internationally, but I think that all of us should be responsible for what happened everywhere in the world because we are not isolated. Everything affects. Everybody is being affected today. No one can say I'm out of it.
Yes, as you mentioned, the world become a small village, and whatever hurt this side of the world, it should hurt us or hit us because we are part of the world. No matter what, as a humanity also, human side, we should feel as a human being with those people who get hurt somehow.
One World Org, promoting cultural understanding through the media.
Situation with the children that are being used as soldiers is a little bit different. These areas are controlled by the rebel groups. The children have access to education. Education has always been number one, and Sri Lanka has had the highest literacy rate in Asia. And these children are normally abducted when they are from their schools. So they and from their homes. And actually, families are required to give one child at least to the cause. Okay. So if the government were to have its way, the children would be in school, and I'm not saying everything would be very perfect, but then at least they would be as normal as it is for the rest of the country. But in this case, the rebels are preventing the children from enjoying what they could from taking their childhood away. So it's a little bit different from where they are poverty-ridden. That's not the situation here, really. It's a little different.
So it become like by law. They use the kids?
Not by law.
They are jungle law, yes. By their jungle law.
Jungle law.
That's what I would say. So, that's how they use the kids, depriving them. And like you say, they run out of men.
Yes.
And also, this is a longer term, and it's easy to brainwash them.
Yes.
So the children are very vulnerable, and it's easy to get them. And suicide bombers, it's easy. So that's what.
So since in Sri Lanka is some kind of different situation, and it is really, really unbelievable, horrible situation. What do you think we can do for that?
Yes, actually there is, in my mind, a 4-point program I think that we can do. And what we are trying to do, we have a group called the Sri Lankan Patriots, and I'm aligned with them and I'm working along with them, but I would like to work with many other groups with this program. There is the International Criminal Court to which these people can be brought to justice, and the way you do that is through the United Nations Security Council. They can launch an investigation and bring the militants to the court. So that would be one way, the first thing. But of course, before anything else, the first thing you would want to do is get the children out of these military training places and put them in normal situation and rehabilitate them. That would be our first concern, is the children, because a day, a month, a year is a very long time in the life of a child. You cannot wait. There's that urgency with children. So secondly, we want to bring these people to justice because, there are punitive remedies that are available through the International Criminal Court under the Rome Statute, and we would like to see that happening. Then thirdly, we would like to see a deterrent. The deterrent would be that no militant group that ever uses children for combat would ever have any legitimacy. It would have to, you would have to start there. There is no cause that would ever justify using a child, and if you used a child, there would be no hope of your ever gaining any legitimacy as a government or as a state or any kind of recognition. There has to be international laws to that effect. Then lastly, and the fourth issue would be with a governing body, some organization. Now we look at UNICEF, which is the leading world child advocacy organization, and that has done a lot of good work in regard to, I would say, vaccination, child education, and those kind of things. But today, Nahid, there is a new world order. It's a whole new world, and the responses is: does the UNICEF have the mandate to give adequate responses to these situations where now children are no longer children, they are combatants, and there are such terrible situations in the world, and we don't see that UNICEF has been able to control this situation. That's why we have child combatants all over the world, hundreds and thousands of them. So we have to look at the role of UNICEF, lastly, I think, and have an organization that would be strong enough, a world body that would perhaps focus entirely on this kind of situation. So that, I think, is the 4-point program that I would say is the answer.
So we should get involved with to empower the United Nations and UNICEF to get involved with those situations. We should push it from here also.
Exactly. We should urge them to look at themselves and how have they been, how have they been performing? Because every year UNICEF goes to Sri Lanka and they do the same thing, which is they give you the numbers. And they go and meet the rebels, they talk to them, they shake hands, and they ask them, please release the children. So the rebels, sometimes they release 10 or 20, and then they will take in another 30 or 100, so it goes on. In other words, they don't have the teeth to do what needs to be done. So perhaps we can urge the UNICEF to work harder and more decisively in this matter. At the same time, I think there has also got to be an overall looking, at reform. Just as the United States is pushing for the reforms in the UN, perhaps they also got to look at at UNICEF itself.
Yes. Children have the right to live a normal life.
Absolutely.
That's
actually the picture of war everywhere, and also whatever they call it, groups or fighting each other, either civil war or regular war. It is ugly to begin with, and to build up civil life in that country or this country, it's really difficult after that the damage happened. So we should look at the whole also situation in general and try to fight for stop the war everywhere. We should be against war no matter what. Politics can do maybe the same job without losing and damage the countries if we can focus in strong political dialogue and things. Hopefully we can do something together for Sri Lankan kids and other kids in the world.
We should be able to be so keen on those laws to protect the children. Child labor, not always you are involved in war. So those kids really, especially in the poor countries or third world countries, I feel the children are the ones who most suffer.
Yes.
They work them so hard. They are not physically able to do certain jobs, but they are forced to do it because they need to survive. Otherwise, they die. So I suppose we have all these different situations, miserable situations to...
You know what, if we switch our thinking to think peacefully instead of fighting as power controllers, the billions what we spend
On
at
war,
on war, if we spend half of it or third of it feeding people and give them a chance to live better life, I guess we will win that in that field better than what we do at war. As a result, I believe we have to focus on be against war everywhere.
Right. I think today it's really a primitive way to resolve conflict through war. I mean, it's been done historically for years, but I think we should find by now another way to resolve conflicts. You know, in a peaceful dialogue and understanding each other. We're all living in the same planet, isn't it?
Yes.
So this is our home. It's our home of everybody. And we're all really one family, really.
Yes.
So I think...
You know, I always ask myself this question. Is like we used to go through wars earlier, in the early days when we were primitive, or we are still trying to get into civilization. But the human beings are the same. They have the greed, and they have the love for power, and it doesn't matter what age, what day, you're going to have these motivations, because greed, it's all about greed and controlling.
Yes.
So as long as we get rid of these characteristics in human beings, we will never move on.
Yes.
This is part, it seems like we were created with those things to make life. I don't know, I keep asking myself, are we getting to a certain point to forget about that or to move on? It seems war is war wherever.
If we look at creativity, we should use our mind and our ability for creativity to look at the main creator, actually. He created us to live on this earth as a human being, to love each other, and he created us with love, not with hate to begin with. And no matter what we do, we can miss this part or that part, and we cannot do, with war, we cannot do the best. But with love, and love for our Creator also, under His rules, no matter what is the faith and religion name, we are human beings and we have the same rights on the earth from God, not from us. It's not something the government will give it to me or give it to you or not give it to you. It is something we have it all. And we should focus on that kind of power of love, to be able to live a happier life, actually.
I think it's a key point what you said, that if we all believe that we were created by the same God, then each one of us is a unique expression of God. If you love God, you have to love each other, because how can...
No, we have to.
How
not
can you love
you? We have to. Otherwise, why we even name ourselves belong to God? To begin with.
That's true. I mean, what does a parents want? Parents want the children to be loved and happy, isn't it? So if I say, I love you, but I hate your child, are you happy?
Yeah, this is the first unit in the world, the family, and love for family, put the family together.
Well, that's really the key, because I think if a child experiences love in the family, if the family is together and it's harmonious, there will be no war in the world, you know. And I think most of the people who, when you talk about greed, who have that kind of desire for something that they don't have, is usually people who do not experience love and have that empty spot where they need to feel. Isn't it? Because you look at, if I read stories about the childhood of a lot of the dictatorship, they all have a dysfunctional family.
Yes, absolutely.
And they were deprived.
Absolutely. No way to have kid comes from loving family will do bad things. No way, because he
learn how to love.
Yes, he raised in good environment. So if you have good environment, healthy environment, you will not have sickness or disease. So no way to see dictator or bad person act in this way coming from good family or raised with love. No.
It's important for our future generations to understand that these conflicts and these children who are being used today are going to be the leaders of tomorrow. And they are growing up knowing nothing but war. And so desperate measures are actually needed to turn the tide.
So do you have an address for the organization you mentioned before? Do you have any information we can give it to the viewers also if they are interested?
Website?
Website, right now we have we do have a petition that's up on the website of Sri Lanka Ecpress www.ecpress.org, www.srilankaexpress.org. We have the petition to the UNICEF. That's up there, and
So
people
this
can
is the
go
first
inside.
step.
This is the first step.
Yes.
This is a very small step, actually.
So you need hands together
Hands together
to make that step
exactly.
action, to give action to that
we,
step.
we want something more, and if you want to write to the UNICEF for yourself, that's also good. That they should take a firmer stand, and more decisive action is needed to save these children, to rescue the children who are being held by militants and being trained, and not just in Sri Lanka but all over the world. I think UNICEF should be doing that more aggressively.
What if you write an article as a journalist, as
Yes.
in your journal, and if you give it to us, maybe we can address it in other newspapers, local newspapers and things, that
Exactly.
people know
Yes.
more details about the whole situation.
I will do that.
I'm
yes.
sure our viewers, our people around, actually, they are full of love and energy, and they are good giver.
Yes.
So we can count on people when we address the issue the right way and deep, to let them understand what they have.
And one thing more, and then you're a teacher. One of the things that's also, now we've been talking about what happens to children once the war is over, or that they are rescued. I think there are, you wonder whether there are adequate psychological counselors even that would address these kind of situations, and that would need, how do you deprogram a child who has been taught that he is a weapon? His body is a weapon. A suicide bomber's body is a weapon.
Yes.
So how do you deal with that? This is why I believe that the responses of today that are needed in situations that are going on today are totally different. They have to be rethought. I mean, it was, you counsel a child in a different way in an earlier time, but today, in these situations, what do you do? Perhaps you have some ideas as a teacher.
I know there's an organization, I told you, World Vision, who have programs actually with
There.
counselors to really re-educate them and help them to overcome the way they were trained, and send them back to the family, because the idea is to reunite them with the family, but
Definitely.
you can't send them directly. You have to really, have to go a phase where they can
Exactly.
actually be re-educated.
Yes, strangely enough, in Sri Lanka, they did that in 2002 when they signed a ceasefire agreement, and then UNICEF came, and many children, about 2,000 children, I think, at that time, if I remember correctly, were released and were put in rehabilitation. But guess who was running the rehabilitation? The militants themselves.
Okay. Again, maybe power is good, but when we use the power for bad image or bad things, we become against God rules and human being rules. Hopefully, God will help us to think different way and remember that we are human beings and we all have the same rights on this earth. Kids or adults or older or whoever living on the earth have the same rights. So we cannot take their rights in our hands. We are not God to do that. We have no right to do that anyway. And we should look at the United Nations and UNICEF as centers of places or organizations. We think they have the power. They are not using their power the right way, actually. But until now, we have no choice except talk to them and push that subject with our power, with our love, as hands together, and let them do something for those cases, and let them save the children of God on this earth. We talk about faith. We talk about people in different faiths. But if we don't know about this faith or that, we will not know how close to each other. They all believe in God, they all believe in certain things, but they don't talk to each other. I get a chance this time to maybe take advantage of visiting Dr. Hassan Hathout with my friend Era Thompson, and she is practice Jews, And I let her ask Dr. Hassan Hathout as a Muslim person about Ramadan in her mind. So I took advantage of that, and I will let you see what I get.
And during Ramadan, we do our annual fasting every day from dawn to sunset. No food, not even water, no anger, no nervousness until sunset, and hopefully continuing the no nervousness part of it. Ramadan, I think, to me, is a drill in the faculty of self-restraint. And to me, it is the proof that we human beings are not animals. When I was a little boy, school used to teach us that man is the head of the animal kingdom, but never did I see or know of an animal that is hungry and finds food and wouldn't eat, or thirsty but wouldn't drink, or hot but wouldn't do sex, not because they are sick or ill or can't or no appetite, but because of a higher meaning, because they are answering a call that is above the call of the flesh and blood of our earthly component, denoting and enjoying and remembering that we, with our bodies, are animals, but with our belief in God, with our spirituality, we are more than animals. As a matter of fact, those who live only with the body and for the pleasures of the body, they can be called animals, but a human being is supposed to be more than that. And therefore Ramadan is when we herald and manifest our humanity.
Is there any particular way, things that you have to do during the Ramadan, or you just can do the normal thing, go to work and...
Of course, having cleared the curtain of our material and the body needs, we have a very wide field of spirituality. The first thing is that all the time, by virtue of our thirst and hunger, we remember God. We are doing this for God. He said do that, and we obey what He says. And then we multiply our prayers. We don't only do the compulsory prayers, but we do more than that, voluntary praying. We try and remember the poor and give them food. We do live as human beings should live. And sometimes I imagine, if it ever occurs to America to add another day to the multitude of days we Americans celebrate, like Mother's Day or Father's Day or Secretary's Day, etc., etc. If we add a self-control day and fast it a la Muslims, the way Muslims fast Ramadan, on that day, what would the crime rate be? How people would handle one another? I'm sure if it ever happens we will realize that we are better than we think if just we can allow ourselves to be.
So let's say at the end of the day, you come together as a family.
At the end of the day, at sunset exactly, not a minute before, we break the fast. In our home, a sip of water, but you can take whatever you like. There are some foods that belong to national and regional folklores, differ from Islamic country to Islamic country, but this is not important. And the night prayer in Ramadan, we go to the mosque and there is a lengthy period of prayer, takes about an hour and a half, and we keep eating and drinking and reading the Quran and praying for other people, praying for humanity, until we take our second and final meal. And when it is dawn, it is no food and drink again until sunset.
So you can eat from sunset till dawn, this period.
Yes.
You can work during this time.
Oh, they go to work
Or
and they
just
do
do the
work.
normal.
And they explore that a human being is more resilient than we think he is. When I had my fasting, when I was a physician in a hospital in England, Britain, and Ramadan came and sunset was at 9:20 in the evening, and going to the operation theater and hearing my colleagues say, sister, it is 11 o'clock, we are dying of thirst, where is tea, etc., etc. I realize and discover that a human being really is much stronger than they think, but they don't resort to that strength that they have. It is like someone having a treasure, but he doesn't know anything about it.
So, but if someone, like your wife said, if someone is pregnant or she is a
There are excuses. There are legitimate excuses, like pregnancy, like being sick, like very heavy work sometimes. Then you can dispose with fasting. If it is a temporary reason, you can make for it later during the year. If it is a permanent one, you just feed a poor person for every day that you didn't fast.
That's a good idea. When did Ramadan start? Is something that Muhammad asked?
You know,
or
the
later on?
lunar year is 11 days shorter than the Gregorian calendar that we follow. And therefore, Ramadan comes 11 days earlier on our calendar every year. And if you live long enough, you will be able to have its taste in all seasons, winter and summer.
Yeah, I think the Jewish calendar and the Muslim calendar is lunar both.
Yes, because we follow the moon,
Yeah.
except of course the Jewish calendar started very much earlier.
Yeah.
But the Hijri or lunar months of Arabia were there for a long time, but the beginning of the Islamic calendar is the second year of the Hijrah or flight of Prophet Muhammad from Mecca to Medina, fleeing the persecution of the people of Mecca. And this was year one on the Islamic calendar, but they are the same months. And Ramadan would be the 10th month of the lunar Arabic calendar.
And the other question I have is, historically, in history, when did Ramadan started? In history.
2 years after Prophet Muhammad fled from Medina, from Mecca to the city of Medina. Then the Quran was revealed to order the fasting of the month of Ramadan.
So Muhammad himself instituted
It
This
was
is from God.
from God, I mean, yeah, but for
revealed
Muhammad.
to Muhammad by angel Gabriel in the Quran, and Muhammad just relayed it to the people.
When the angel gave it, did he mention a specific reason or just
No,
just do it?
no, it just mentioned that fasting is an old exercise that was practiced even by people before you Muslims, and your fasting will be the month of Ramadan, and the Prophet taught us that it was from pre-dawn to sunset for the 30 days of the month of Ramadan.
Beside the food, is there anything else that you cannot do during Ramadan? I mean, relationship between husband and wife, or
Not during fasting, but at the night
nighttime is
you
okay.
can eat and drink and do sex, etc., etc.
So it's only
And when I said sex, it is only to your wife,
your wife, of course.
not a free sex as it is today.
Of course. Yeah. That's interesting. I think that the Ramadan is probably the longest fasting period among religion. I think so, no?
I think so,
Yeah.
yes. 30 consecutive days,
Yeah.
and sometimes it is in really hot summer,
Yeah.
and the pain of the thirst.
So you can't drink either.
No, not even water,
Wow,
not a sip of water.
that's very difficult.
It can be difficult, but it is the proof
Mm,
that this very difficult thing you can overcome.
of course.
Yes, it is a difficulty, but you have the proof that you are stronger than the difficulty.
Now, like today, among the Muslims, do you find out that still young people doing it?
Oh yes, my grandson, Hassan, named after me, he observes the month of Ramadan. It's his 3rd year now, since he was 8 years old. And of course, so many children do fast. Of course, it is obligatory when you are an adult,
Mm,
and adulthood is puberty in Islam. But of course, many people, many children would like to fast before that. As long as they can stand it, it's all right. It gives them the training. When it becomes obligatory, they seem to be well prepared for it.
Do you find out that most of the population, let's say the Arab people, the Muslim who come to America, most of them observe the Ramadan, or a lot of them?
I
don't?
would say yes.
Yeah.
They observe the fasting more than they observe even the compulsory prayers. We pray 5 times a day, obligatory prayer. And I know many Muslims who don't observe it. When Ramadan comes, you will find many people who don't usually pray, who even do disobediences like drinking alcohol. Ramadan comes, away with the alcohol, they pray, they fast, they live in another atmosphere. It is a spiritual atmosphere, and many people respond to it.
How do you explain it? Why they respond to it more than the?
It is the spirituality of Ramadan. Really.
It's interesting because the Jewish people have the same phenomena. You know, we fast only once a year,
Mhm.
and the young people one a day. So, but yet even people who are not so religious, and then they observe it. It's like something like you said that maybe it's very strong There's something in it that is very compelling and kind of identifying with the group of people, or something very compelling.
I know of at least one priest in Los Angeles who observes the fasting of Ramadan. He does the fasting exactly like Muslims, and he has been doing that for 4 years.
Why is he doing it?
He likes the experience itself. It is a spiritual thing. Self-control. And the lacking element in today's world, especially today's America, self-control. It is not the question of be what you are. It's the question, be what you should be. And this is the exercise. As you get your muscles stronger through heavy weight lifting, you get your willpower stronger through doing this willpower exercise. And it works.
Promoting cultural understanding through the media.
Well, I find it really interesting. The Jewish people, and I come from a Jewish background, we fast only one day a year, but it's from a full day, from sundown to sundown.
I see.
And
you take water?
I'm not sure.
I think you do.
You do?
I think you do.
So we are much more lenient than you.
Well,
I guess the angel that talked to us was much more sympathetic.
it is symbolic. It is the message that you, human beings, should have self-control.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
But the Jewish tradition, and I remember my mother, before she would go and pray in the synagogue, the tradition is that you go and to the people that you offended,
Yes.
and that you ask them to forgive you. Because God said, before you come to me
Yes.
and ask my forgiveness, you have to come to your fellow man
Yes.
and ask their forgiveness. And
That's
only
good.
then come to me.
That's good, and I think that it is a criterion for fasting. Draws our attention that it is good to do that every day,
That's
not only the day of fasting, because I don't apologize to people whom I hurt once a year only.
Absolutely.
But the once a year and putting it in the sacred context of worship and fasting is a reminder. The same as Ramadan, we are not supposed to live Ramadan. We charge our batteries to use the stored electricity outside there all time there is. So it is charging our batteries.
That's a good image. 30 days you charge your batteries and that's sufficient for the whole year. Well, I guess the Jewish people have only one day to charge the battery. They have to do it
Believe me,
very intensely.
Had it not been for politics and the politicians, the Jewish people and the Muslim people would have come along together very nicely.
I think so, like we get along, we feel at home, isn't it?
We pray for them.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's not only in the way we fast, but also the Jewish and Muslim tradition is very similar in many ways. We have a similar dietary law. We're not allowed to eat pork, and we prepare our food in a certain way.
That is the Abrahamic tradition.
Yeah.
And when you come to Christianity, Jesus was circumcised and didn't eat pork. It was after Jesus that Paul allowed it in Christianity in order to make it easier for people to convert to Christianity. But when you take Christianity itself, and when you study Jesus himself, he was a Jew, he didn't eat pork, and he was circumcised. And it takes after the common father, Abraham. So it is a line, it is a chain, and each of the three religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, are links in the one chain.
Yeah. As I understand, you're a medical doctor, and you know a lot about health issues. And how do you view the dietary law of the Islam and Jewish tradition? Do you think there's also health reason behind, or it's
Medically, I
strictly a
think
religious reason?
I do not fast because of medical benefits. I fast because God says so, and the dictum is when God says something, my only response is I hear and I obey. If it were any human being, I might ask why.
Yeah.
But when God says something, if I believe in God, my only answer is I hear and I obey. But medically speaking, fasting can have great health advantages. You get rid of stored poisons in your body, excessive fat, the willpower, improving certain illnesses, etc. These are good byproducts.
True.
But we do fast because God says so.
Yeah, that's true. But even a simple dietary law, like not eating pork, I think at that time...
We
pork
don't eat pork anyway.
Yeah, pork at that time also maybe was a pretty dirty animal. At that time there was no refrigeration, and you can see some of the wisdom behind it.
Whether pork is dangerous for your health
Yeah.
or not, I do not eat pork because my reason is God says so. I can neither say to him no, nor can I say to him tell me why. And that's only about God. Any mortal, any human being is subject to be questioned. But God, I wouldn't be a Muslim if I say to God, tell me why, convince me.
Yeah, even though you can think, well, God is my father, and everything that God tell me, even though he doesn't explain the reason, just like if I am talking to my kids, I may not tell them why, because I think maybe at that point they don't understand, and they will obey me just because they love me and they respect me and they trust me. But the reason I tell them is not arbitrarily, but there's a good reason why I tell them. And it could be that God also is not just he said, okay, pork no, but probably there was a good reason why he asked us, because he loves us and because it probably is not good for us. Because, I think...
There must be a reason, whether in our current state of knowledge we discovered the reason or not is immaterial.
Yeah.
But maybe someday we know why.
Yeah. Well, I think it's our relationship to God. I think over history we grow and mature in our relationship to God and in our understanding of God and our relationship to one another. And I think maybe thousands of years ago, science was very, there was no science hardly, and maybe God had to talk to us in a way that we could understand at that time. Now today we know much more. Maybe God is able to tell us the same thing in a different way.
One interesting thing about science, the more it grows, the more we discover how little it is.
Yeah.
The more we accumulate knowledge, we realize that our field of ignorance is expanding, really.
Sure, that's it.
And therefore we should use science, but we shouldn't worship it.
Absolutely. But I think if God created the universe, he is the greatest scientist, because he created it with an order and everything has its place and structure. So I think to separate religions from science is really maybe not understanding God, because God is is in harmony between the mind and the body, is in harmony. God gave us physical body as well as He gave us spirit. So
We pursue science in obedience to God.
Yeah.
Because as the Quran says, walk about on earth and find out how He started the creation. Is this science or religion? It is science because He's on order to go on discovering.
Yeah.
And it is a religion because it is a phrase from the Quran,
Exactly.
a quotation from the Quran.
So you don't see any contradiction between
There shouldn't be a confrontation at all. We have been given a mind to think.
Yeah.
Think are equal to animals. And these are the words of the Quran. We have to use our mind in order to decipher and add to our knowledge about God's creation. Because the more we see His will and His power, the more we adore Him
Exactly.
and feel humble in relation to Him.
I heard that even Einstein came to the
Yes.
realization that
Yes.
God exists, and that's very interesting.
Yes.
I mean, like you say, that's it, huh? Oh, the more, and in a way we are expanding of our knowledge of God, Through science we come to know God more and more, that one aspect of God. And of course I think through developing our relationship with each other and through developing our spiritual relationship with God, then we expand our spiritual knowledge. So I think it goes hand in hand. Because I think that you can see God in everything.
Even Abraham, our common grandfather, the Quran describes the way he believed in God. He found his people worshipping little statues, idols. He said, "What's that?" Then he looked at a shining star and he said, "That's my God." But the star disappeared. Came the moon. He said, "Oh, this is larger. It must be God." Then the moon went. Then came the sun, largest. He said, "This is my God." And it went. And he realized that his God was the one beyond these, who created the star and the moon and the sun and is directing the universe. The one, the creator is the one beyond the creation. Like I gave a book to my granddaughter when she was little, and I told her who wrote this book, and she read the name of the author. I told her, if I remove the name of the author and suggested to you that this book wrote itself by itself, she said, "Impossible."
Yeah.
Well, if the book cannot write itself, how can the creation create itself?
It's a good analogy.
Without the creator.
Very good point.
I'll let you go with this message, and thank you for watching.